it's my definition would be, I think about more like, some kind of supreme intelligence or field of consciousness, collective mind, collective consciousness, and everything is created, like the universe or us or anything. It's kind of created as a fractal part of that infinite mind. So, for example, if you they take pictures of galaxies and how they're all linked, and you look at neurons, you see a resemblance because as above, so below, you get the same patterns of different scales. You have the planets orbiting stars, and you have electrons orbiting nuclei of atom. So you have all these different versions. God is, or this supreme intelligence, is creating reality, the universe, in a fractal pattern, in a fractal way.
Hey everyone, it's Julia with the Dream Life Foundation, and I'm here with Mr.
Mike Sygula from shafiri.com.
And today we wanted to talk about spirituality and what both of our views are on spirituality for those of you who are new to spirituality or just curious about what spirituality is. So Mike, what is your definition of spirituality?
Yeah, so it's a deep question, I think. You get people who, everyone I think can have a different definition of what is spirituality. So for me, this is something like living in harmony with myself, having my thoughts and actions aligned, and living in harmony with my surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
It can mean many things. That's like the general idea. So let's say, if you try to be honest, you don't lie to yourself, you don't take advantage of others or manipulate others for your own personal gain. You just walk your talk, your line, your actions with your words. Your words with your actions. That would be like the first thing. It's who you are and how you respond to your environment and the world and people around you. And if that's balanced and harmonious, then I think it's a good basis of having a spiritual life. That's like the first aspect, I would say. What about you? What's your definition?
So my definition of spirituality is similar to yours. I think it's really about connecting with yourself, maybe your higher self for those who are already spiritual and know what that is. But basically just, like you said, being in harmony with yourself, but also being connected to who you really are and your true essence instead of what everyone else kind of tells you, like the way you should be, how you should, do things, and all of these beliefs that people kind of put on you. And also it's being connected to the universe and, our creator or whatever he or she is.
Yeah. It's definitely, I would say this is like the second part where it is about having some kind of a connection with deeper meaning, deeper ideas like God, even though God has a lot, the word itself has bad associations. I think people kind of, when you say the word God, people think of guys sitting in heaven, with a beard and all this kind of stuff. But how would you define God? What God is in your definition?
For me, I think God is the ultimate creator, a combination of the feminine and masculine energy, and just basically the universe in general. So I don't really view God as a being or like an individual person, like how a lot of religions, see gods as like this fatherly figure or motherly figure, whatever it is. I think it's more general, like there's the one creator, and from him all existence begins.
Yeah, I think it's my definition would be, I think about more like, some kind of supreme intelligence or field of consciousness, collective mind, collective consciousness, and everything that is created, like the universe or us or anything, it's kind of created as a fractal part of that infinite mind. So, for example, if you they take pictures of galaxies and how they're all linked, and then you look at your neurons, you see resemblance because as above, so below, you get the same patterns on different scales. You have, planets orbiting stars, and then you have electrons orbiting nuclei of atom. So you have all these different versions, and God is, or this supreme intelligence, is creating reality or the universe in a fractal pattern, in a fractal way, where everything is a farther reflection of something else. But ultimately, it's like one being. It's like the same thing. When you look at your organism or your body, it's like a community of trillions of cells, and you have like billions of trillions of bacteria that have different functions and do different things. And they all are like individual units of consciousness or organisms or whatever you want to think about it, but they together combine, create you as individual consciousness. So I think it's the same thing on a bigger scale, where you have everything in the universe is actually one thing, one mind, one consciousness. And yeah, that's kind of what I think about God, more like a collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about like the fractal universe, for those who are like, kind of new to spirituality and don't really understand that, like how would you describe fractals and how we kind of reflect that in everything in our life?
Yeah, I mean, so fractals is just a concept in geometry and mathematics. It's like patterns that repeat that hold similarities. So, for example, if you look at a tree branch, it splits into more branches, for example. So that's an example of a fractal.
Mm-hmm.
You have some pattern that keeps repeating, and you can see these ideas. Like, for example, if you look at your lungs, and I don't know, like if you do X-rays or something, you see how veins look inside the lungs and all this kind of stuff. And then lungs have this function of, you breathe in oxygen and you breathe out carbon dioxide, and trees can do the opposite, right? They, breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out wherever. They absorb it through photosynthesis, create oxygen. So it's like, they even have this kind of structure. They look like lungs in a way, like these veins. So that you see these fractals on every level.
Mm-hmm.
But we are kind of focused on individual parts and see everything from a limited perspective. That's why we cannot see the bigger picture. I was thinking about when you fly over an area, when you're on a plane, and you look at the trees, maybe a couple of kilometers below you, and they kind of look like a very plain field, right? If you look at your hair from maybe a few meters up, it seems like one kind of form, right? But if you zoom, you start seeing individual pieces of hair, and if you zoom in, you see individual trees. Everyone's different, and all this kind of stuff. So it's the same thing with everything. You look at galaxies from very far, and it seems like one neural network. But you zoom in, and it's like a lot of individual aspects. This is like same with pixels on the computer screen. You zoom in, you have individual units. You zoom out, you have the whole picture. So this is like an example of that. This God or creative, collective consciousness creates reality that's composed of smaller parts of the same thing that just slightly changes and evolves, and you suddenly have everything that looks completely different, but it's actually one thing. Yeah. What's next? Okay, we talk about God, we talk about spirituality. How do you compare spirituality to religion?
So for me, I think that spirituality is a combination of many aspects of religion, except that there's no separation, there's no segregation, and there's no restriction. So I think for a lot of people, that are spiritual, they're not necessarily subscribing to one religion because they believe in the core concepts of all religions, and just live through those core concepts without identifying with a specific religion. So it's kind of like with religion, everything is separated, and with spirituality, you can believe in everything and it's okay, and you don't get like condemnation for your beliefs or anything like that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the issues with religions, that you have some kind of dogmas, framework, set of rules and principles and practices that kind of lock you in a system that might be not necessarily correct, or things change over time, meaning changes, like people interpret things differently. Like if you look at how many denominations of Christianity we have, like all these people argue about their version or their God or whatever, and everyone says like my God is the only true, or my religion is the only true one, where you have all these contradicting beliefs everywhere around it. And that's kind of, to me, it's not something I want to engage with because of something like that. If you look at Catholicism, using religion to control people and to control beliefs, and you don't really need to have a religion to be spiritual, to be good. You can use, religion there are a lot of valuable practices and teachings, and I think you can kind of take whatever resonates with you from all these different teachings and religions, but you don't have to be completely locked into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing that is really useful for me is I grew up Buddhist, which, some people see as a religion, but for me it's more of a philosophy of life. So when I think about spirituality, it's more about, your philosophy of life and your ideologies and how you live life according to certain morals, and, connecting with love and peace, and, all of those things that creates harmony within all of us. So it's not really about focusing on certain rules and limitations that religions can have. It's more about, just learning to live a way of life where you're creating good karma for yourself, the planet, and for other people.
Yeah, and I think everyone has conscience as well. If your religion tells you, if it doesn't resonate with you, like you feel like it's something that you shouldn't be doing because your conscience tells you, like maybe this is a warning sign, The problem, another issue with religion is that, if you grew up in religious background, like your parents, for example, they are followers of a particular religion, they are very likely to be indoctrinated from a very early age and become another follower without questioning, without seeing other options. And it's especially if you go for it at a very early age where your brain is developing, like you're prone to suggestion, and it's almost like a form of hypnosis.
Yeah.
So you will reject even rational things that can contradict these beliefs because you're indoctrinated. So that's a big problem, I think. When you have no, you almost cannot choose what you want to believe or what you want to follow because you're raised in a specific way, and then you become programmed by it.
Yeah, and I think some people can be programmed from like an early age, but we all can be self-aware and learn to challenge our beliefs, and I think that's a great way of like learning. So like for me, even though I grew up Buddhist, I always was open to learning about different religions and cultures and like learning different ways to expand my mind and knowledge. And so for me, like I found a lot of commonalities among all of the religions. They all praise like do good and you'll receive good things and things like that. So, you might start from a religious background, but as long as you're open to the idea of exploring different like cultures, backgrounds, religions, and stuff, I think you can gain a lot of knowledge from that. At least for me, it's been like that.
Yeah, I think you raised like two really interesting points. One is like to have an open mind. Like I think this is very important to question things and to have open mind. And even if you have some belief system that you follow, like some religion, whatever it is, like still being open to other ideas and other teachings and concepts, because you can learn something from everyone. And, it's not something that one thing is the ultimate truth and everything else is not. How do you know yours is true if you have like thousands of different versions? So I think there's a lot of points of perspective that look at the same concept sometimes from a different angle. Like you said about like a lot of religions talk about, you're gonna be good, do good things, and that's gonna come back to you, or whatever, salvation or anything like that. It's like a concept of karma, for example, in Buddhism, and I think Jesus even talked about something like that, like shit. What was that?
I don't know.
Anyway. Alright. But yeah, but you have concepts that repeat. Like for example, reincarnation. Why so many religions, even if they were appearing in different parts of the world, in different periods in history, they all came up with the same concept. And then you have all these people who have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences or clinical death, and then they explain the same thing, like, I just left my body, I saw myself floating on top of my body. So obviously, maybe a lot of people had these experiences, like they saw themselves being the soul, they saw themselves, maybe they died, like they had near-death experiences, something like that. And these ideas then became part of reality. A lot of religious movements started to integrate them. So, that's why I think you can learn from a lot of religions, but you also have to have some kind of a system that is like, questioning, like, values, beliefs, if this is going to benefit me, if this is good for others. Because it's as every system, when you have people in groups that believe in something, it's easy to manipulate them. So that's why religions were often hijacked, or like Catholicism, Christianity, It's like trying to control groups of people in the name of the belief that is so strong. So you gotta watch out. Like, if you gotta kind of approach it with a distance and open-mindedness, and yeah. Okay, so another subject, going through a spiritual awakening. I think this is like a very important thing for many people who are getting into spirituality. They start to kind of see through illusion. And there are all these different levels and ways. And, for example, maybe you start realizing that the governments are just engaging in wars, and it's not something that you want to agree on, and or corporations, they they just try to make money, and people are suffering, and all these kind of resources are being depleted just for the sake of this materialistic pleasure that's never really bringing you pleasure anyway. So you kind of fall into that rat race where you just keep chasing, because that's what society is telling you, that's what movies tell you, that's what everyone's telling you, that's what you grew up believing in. And then you find yourself empty and stressed, and everything's falling apart, your relationship is falling apart, because you keep becoming that thing that you've been programmed to do. So then you go through this awakening, like suddenly, it doesn't make sense why I don't have balance in life, why I do things that don't make me happy.
Yeah, and there's like no true fulfillment.
Yeah, that can be one option of going through the spiritual awakening, but I think there are like all sorts of different ways and levels, So, yeah, what do you think about it?
I mean, my spiritual awakening was basically going through pain, and I think for most people that's kind of where it starts. You experience something really negative in your life, and it kind of forces you to reevaluate everything. So for me, it was like really random, where I was like driving my car, listening to a song, and I just had this moment where I realized, like, the person that I've been looking for the entire time was me. And for me, that's what started my spiritual awakening, like connecting with who I really am and realizing that I am enough just the way I am, and that I don't have to live up to other people's expectations. So I think for a lot of people, a spiritual awakening really does come from pain. I don't know, what was your experience like?
I think it was a mixture of different experiences and a combination of things. So, for example, I always had a lot of, I had strong intuition, like I knew there's more to life than what we are told. So I would research things, I would read something, I would watch videos, I would just be curious about things that are called paranormal or mystical or whatever. I had a lot of interest in these topics. And then I would also try to experiment with these things. So there was lots of experience-based things, but one example was I was reading about out-of-body experiences more than 10 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I read some books about it, and people were describing techniques and how they do astral traveling and leave their bodies and do whatever they want to do. So I became really interested and fascinated, because it sounded to me like, you become a superhero, you can go anywhere you want and do whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to really see if this is true. And I started practicing some exercises that they were suggesting, and then one time I had something that I believe was an out-of-body experience. So that was kind of one of those many examples where I was curious, I wanted to test it out myself, and I found out there's something to this. you know. So, and there was a lot of these things. Like, for example, another one was like maybe 2008. I was at this big event in London called Mind Body Spirit Festival, and you know there was like all these different people there, and one vendor or wherever these guys were, they were basically like three guys. They said they are praying to Jesus, and they are asking me like, "Do you want to try? You want us to pray to Jesus for you?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever, you know." That was my approach. So I just sat down with them. They just started holding me, and they said like, "What is that you want to know?" And like, what do you want? And I said, "I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how it all works." So they're like, "So you want to know the truth?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to know the truth." So they started praying and holding me, and that's it. You know, we finished, and after that, I went to do a meditation in a workshop. And when I was meditating, I suddenly felt this like amazing love, like energy surrounding me. I was like, wow, this is like so nice, you know. And I felt like, wow, this is definitely connected maybe with that experience.
Yeah.
But you know, and then funny enough, like my journey afterwards was actually, you know, getting into starting truth theory, which is like trying to figure out theories and truth and all this kind of stuff, and you know, uncovering more and more of how things work. So I don't know if it was related to that experience or not, you know, but that was like one of these things to make me think about this stuff. And over the years, it just started getting deeper and deeper, and finally, like, everything is just completely different, like you see things differently. Yeah. But I think, you know, a lot of people who go through spiritual awakening have some kind of challenge, because, you know, suddenly, like, a lot of things that you thought were normal are just not normal anymore. Or, you know, your view, like, you start noticing how people focus on things that are not very interesting to you anymore, because you suddenly see world from a different perspective. So, for example, you might start losing your friends, or maybe, you know, you will find like the topics they talk about, the things they are interested in are not so interesting to you anymore, because you start like seeing things on a deeper level, or you start seeing flaws in things, you know, you see through marketing or lies of politicians or whatever it is, you know. So I think it can be a very lonely experience, and yeah, it's almost like can be like traumatic sometimes, you know. Especially if it's not gradual, but it's something that just happens like overnight. You know, you have some realization or something, and I think it's maybe we can talk about like what you can do to go through it without bigger challenges. You know, like smoothly. What do you think?
I mean, honestly, I feel like everyone kind of has a programmed, like, date or time that they have the spiritual awakening. So I don't really think that, like, you can just, I don't know, give out tips of how to have a spiritual awakening. I don't think it really works that way, because it's more like when you're trying to look for something and make it happen, then it doesn't happen, you know?
But more like, what can you do when you're having a hard time and you're going through it? Because a lot of things, you know, your belief system can be destroyed, your friends suddenly, like, you know, might not be understanding you, or family, you want to talk about it because it's important, but no one else understands you. So there's a lot of challenges, especially if it's like some instant thing, you know, it's like sometimes it happens overnight, or like.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, reading a lot and, you know, watching like videos on spirituality and, you know, different concepts really helps me to recognize that there are a lot of people who are spiritual and who have had this experience. So when you can connect with others and relate to them, that gives you a sense of community. So there's tons of spirituality groups out there or people that you can learn from to make the process easier. But I think reading really is, the key, because I think before I had my actual spiritual awakening, I was reading all of these books where it led up to the spiritual awakening. Like, I think The Power of Now is a really powerful book by Eckhart Tolle. So yeah, it's, learning new coping skills to help you process everything. And I think a lot of people can miss learning coping skills as they grow up. Like, that was something that was, missing in my life. So I think going through a spiritual awakening, you just have to learn that you have something to rely on bigger than yourself, and that's like the universe,
Yeah, I think if you can start looking for people and support, you're gonna find it. You're gonna start going to events. You're gonna start checking out some groups on Facebook, meetups, whatever it is, forums, maybe finding some YouTubers or websites like Truth Theory, whatever it is. You're gonna start seeing people, hopefully making some friends and having some support. That's the important aspect,
Yeah, I also think with just the law of attraction in general, when you start focusing more on spirituality and these types of things, you're going to start attracting these people who are into the same things. So maybe in the very beginning, it might be a lonely journey, but as you get more into it, you're going to naturally attract these people who are into it, who will, kind of motivate you and expand you even further. So
yeah, definitely. I think if you focus on it and you really want to keep exploring it further and further, start bringing this information to people through the law of attraction or your own actions. Thank you so much for checking out True Spirituality Episode 1. In Episode 2, we will discuss reincarnation, karma, law of attraction, soul groups, and soul plan. It is coming next week, so stay tuned. Till next time.